going with my mother to the fabric store. I hated the fabric store. Every minute in the fabric store seemed to be like a year to me. I would have rather been beaten with a stick than have to go to the fabric store, where there was no TV, there were no books, there were no toys, there were no cool electronics to look at. They're just bolts of fabric and women talking about woman stuff. And a few forlorn men and children standing in the aisle with that hollow look in their eyes, looking as though they could not wait for the end of days to come. But I did learn one thing from my time in the fabric store. I learned how to wait patiently. Advent, 4 Sundays before Christmas. It's a season of waiting. We are Advent people in this world. It's our season, and it fits. Sometimes people think that Easter might be our season because then we get to proclaim the resurrection from the dead, right? But Easter is a distant reality, but way out there. Advent's where we are right now, where we always are right now. We wait as people of God. We wait, and we wait, and we wait. And unless Jesus happens to return sometime during this century, all of us in this room will have spent our entire lives on this earth waiting. Granted, every once in a while, we get to wait in beautiful places, and we get to wait with fun people. But my experience of life, and maybe it's just me, but most of my waiting has been done in the fabric store. Isaiah speaks to us as he speaks to the first Hebrews. These were not Jews, by the way. There are no Jews yet. Judaism is a religion that was developed during the time between the Testaments, after Malachi and before Matthew. During the New Testament, you see Jews. But at this point, you see Hebrews. They had just about come to the point of being exiled. They're called Hebrews because they initially settled in and around an area called Hebron, hence the name. And he speaks to these people who have been free from slavery for quite a while, since the Exodus. But they're just about to come under Babylonian control. When this text was probably written, Israel, the northern kingdom, had already fallen to Samaria and had been destroyed. And Jerusalem, the capital of the southern kingdom, would be under siege in probably about another 10 years or so. And these people were really, really scared, because they had seen what had happened in the northern kingdom. They had seen all of the males killed. They had seen all of the male children killed, even pregnant women killed, fields salted so that nothing could grow there. See, and what they did not know was they did not know that the Babylonians, who were about to take them over, were a wholly different people from the Assyrians who had conquered the northern kingdom. See, God had chosen the Babylonians intentionally to be his instrument, because they were very different conquerors from the Assyrians. They would not destroy the people of the southern kingdom. They'd carry a lot of them off for a while. They'd make them pay taxes to Babylon for a while. But eventually, they'd be restored to the promised land. Now, you and I, we have the great advantage of hindsight. We can look back from our perspective, sitting here in 2017, and say, chill, Hebrews. God's got you covered. Good heavens, what a bunch of commotion over nothing. You'll just spend a few years in captivity, and then you're going to get returned to the promised land, and you're going to get to rebuild your temple, and everything's going to be fine. We can kind of be arrogant from our position of history, looking back at people who were frightened about the future. But of course, then we moan and tremble over our own troubles as though God were no longer in heaven. And people a few thousand years from now may well look back at us and say the same thing we say to Isaiah's people. But all of what was going on then and all of what is going on for us now is why Isaiah speaks these words of God. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended and her iniquity is pardoned, and that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all of her sins. Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom, and gently lead those that are with young. Like Isaiah's people waited for Christ to come and to rescue them from their peril, we wait for him to return and rescue us from our perils, whatever they may be. I mean, we're fortunate people. We have not been conquered by a foreign power that takes away our ability to worship our God and forces us to uproot ourselves and our families and go to a foreign land. We're fortunate people, but all that could happen. It could happen quite easily. We're all very aware of a little nation called North Korea and the hatred that leader has for us. We don't fear him, but the feeling of unrest right now, the feeling of a little bit of insecurity is almost palpable. It reminds me of the times in 2001 when fighter jets were circling overhead after the World Trade Center and Pentagon had been attacked. Never believe that we are invulnerable. Never believe that you know the mind of God, what he will allow to happen, when he will allow evil to advance. And even without national upheaval right now, we still have our own little personal trials and tribulations. Those personal troubles can always seem magnified during this season for some reason, with all the social pressure that goes on, with work and with sickness and with death and with financial struggles and with addiction and with family stress. And during all of that, we're waiting for Christ to return, to take us to the promised land. During this season of Advent, Isaiah reminds us to calm down, that our shepherd will be returning for us, that he will gather us up in his arms like a lamb, and he will lead us to paradise. He comforts us in our own personal trials with the absolute promise that our good shepherd loves us, that he walks right beside us through this valley of the shadow of death, and eventually that he will usher us into the new heaven that St. Peter talks about, and the new earth. There are days when we feel like we just cannot go on, like this is all for naught. But listen to Isaiah. Be comforted looking back through history, because history is our friend. Because we get to see that God always fulfills his promises and that his people will always be delivered from every trial when it is time. Jesus told his disciples before he was crucified, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." He promised that. You can believe it. And until that day when we walk into the mansion that has been prepared for us already, the mansion, by the way, where a good many of our loved ones already live, until that day, he walks with us and he provides us with everything we truly need. We have his word to instruct us if we choose to read it and hear it. We have the baptismal waters that pour over us if we choose to remember them. We have his very body and blood to nourish us, to strengthen us, to forgive all of our sin, to empower us to withstand the slings and the arrows of the evil one, if we choose to eat. Hear, remember, eat, and be comforted.